It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. South Korea convenes a National Security Council meeting following North Korea's latest missile launch. While further analysis on the launch is ongoing, some defense officials point to advances in the North's capability. It was the People's Party's turn to address the National Assembly here in South Korea today. The minor opposition bloc's co-chair emphasized job creation and the need for dialogue with Pyongyang over sanctions. The debate over Brexit heats up, and the time for Brits to vote on leaving or remaining in the EU is drawing closer. It's also a decision that could have adverse effects on Korea's economy in a number of ways. North Korea test-fired 2 mid-range ballistic missiles yet again this morning in the regime's latest act of defiance against the international community. Pyongyang has launched 6 mid-range missiles so far, and its last attempt seems to show it's made some technological advances with its ballistic missile program. Our Connie Kim has our top story.
North Korea seems to be further isolating itself from the international community with the launch of 2 projectiles off its east coast on Wednesday. Both are presumed to be intermediate-range ballistic missiles. The Joint Chiefs of Staff says the first missile was fired at 5:58 a.m. South Korea time from the North's Wonsan launch site that flew 150 kilometers before exploding in midair. The second was launched at 8:04 a.m. from the same place and is believed to have flown some 400 kilometers, the furthest so far for a missile of this type. Military authorities say the distance was made possible by a steep launch angle. While the first launch has been deemed a failure, it's still not known if the second one was or not. But a high-level government official noted the technological advancements the North has made in any case and said Seoul and Washington are analyzing whether the second missile was fitted with a nuclear warhead. The Joint Chiefs of Staff condemned the North's launch, calling it a threat to international peace and security.
North Korea will face stronger sanctions from South Korea and the international community with this missile launch. The South Korean military is on alert and maintaining a full state of readiness in the event of any North Korean provocations that threaten the peace in the South.
Pyongyang has launched 4 Musudan missiles in the past 2 months, and all have ended in failure. The test-firing blitz comes after Kim Jong-un in March ordered the military to test a ballistic missile topped with a nuclear warhead. The Musudan missile has a range of up to 4,000 kilometers, so it could theoretically target any location in Japan and U.S. military bases in Guam. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And the nation's top office responded to the North's latest provocation. The National Security Council convened a meeting to assess the situation, while President Park warned Pyongyang of further isolation at a unification meeting. Song Ji-sun highlights the South's swift reaction.
Just a couple of hours after Pyongyang's missile launches, the presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae convened a National Security Council meeting chaired by NSC Chief Kim Kwan-jin. The council analyzed Pyongyang's missile capabilities based on the trajectory of the ballistic missiles launched Wednesday and discussed countermeasures both on defense and diplomatic fronts. Later in the afternoon, President Park attended a National Unification Advisory Council meeting as scheduled. Over 500 advisors gathered from the Americas, Japan, and China to discuss the path to peaceful unification of the 2 Koreas. Park expressed appreciation to those building international support for unification on the Korean peninsula. Although she did not directly cite Wednesday morning's missile launches, Park warned North Korea to refrain from further provocations and to ban its nuclear weapons program.
북한이 이러한 도발을 포기하지 않는 한 세계의 어떤 나라도 북한과 정상적인 관계를 맺지 않을 것이며 어떤 기구도 북한의 도움의 손길을 내밀지 않을 것입니다. 무모한 도발 끝에는 완전한 고립과 자멸이 기다리고 있다는 것을 북한 정권은 자각해야 할 것입니다.
Against North Korea's continued provocations, President Park once again stressed the need for national unity towards unification and called on the people to diligently work towards peace and prosperity of the nation. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea wasn't alone in condemning the missile launches by North. Other countries were quick to respond too. According to our Kwon, the issue was also raised at an annual security forum in Beijing with a North Korean representative in attendance.
Seoul's foreign ministry on Wednesday called North Korea's launches a clear violation of the latest UN Security Council resolution and a threat to peace.
South Korea condemns the missile launch and warns that North Korea will face stronger sanctions and pressure from Seoul and the international community.
This was echoed by the ministry's vice negotiator for the six-party talks, Kim Gun, over in Beijing, where the Northeast Asia Cooperation Dialogue, also dubbed the Mini Six-Party Talks, is being held. Kim denounced the North's missile launches and called on North Korea to denuclearize immediately, while also stressing the importance of implementing the latest UN Security Council sanctions on the regime. He made the remarks during a speech attended by the North's representative, Deputy Director for North American Affairs, Cheong. That's according to diplomatic sources in China, which also said Sung Kim, the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea policy, criticized the North for its actions. He also reportedly reiterated a warning he'd made the day before regarding predictions of a North Korean missile launch, in which he said Pyongyang must not do anything that violates the UN resolution. There is no word yet of any reaction from Choi Sun-hee. However, she reportedly declined to respond to reporters' questions on Wednesday's missile launch. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department has condemned Pyongyang's provocations, and Japan's Prime Minister Abe called the launches unforgivable. China's foreign ministry, however, called on the relevant countries to not take any action that could escalate tensions on the Korean peninsula, calling the situation, quote, very complex and sensitive. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Let's sidestep from North Korea to other stories now. Seoul's government laid out a timeline for its plan to revamp Gimhae International Airport in the southern port city of Busan. For details on the long overdue project, let's turn to our Park Ji-won.
Korea will begin construction on a major upgrade to Gimhae International Airport, including a new runway and a new international passenger terminal in 2021. The project has a target end date of 2026, and the goal is to raise airport capacity to 38 million passengers annually from the 12 million recorded in 2015. The timeline was announced Wednesday morning at a meeting chaired by Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won. Several related ministers were in attendance, including the land minister, who vowed to upgrade the related transport systems, including more roads and rail lines to improve accessibility. The decision follows years of fierce debate involving two candidate regions, with each one campaigning to locate the new airport in their area. The ruling party had groups promoting the different candidate locations, but offered its support for the decision while the opposition was more critical.
The government's decision was a very difficult one to make, but it was also a reasonable one. Our party accepts the announcement from a broader perspective.
I believe now is the time when the government and political parties should stop making empty promises that can cause regional conflicts.
The airport upgrade plan bid out proposals to build a new second airport in one of two candidate locations, Busan's Gadok Island and the inland city of Miryang in Gyeongsangnam-do province. The decision was based on a year-long government feasibility study. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
In the domestic political arena, it was the third and final parliamentary address by the main political parties at the National Assembly. An Cheol-soo, the co-chair of the minor opposition People's Party, called on lawmakers to focus their efforts on making South Korea a more dynamic economy. Kim Young-gil has more on An's remarks.
The co-leader of the People's Party, An Cheol-soo, called on the ruling and opposition parties to cooperate in forming a parliamentary committee focused solely on job creation in an effort to deal with Korea's unemployment issues.
The Future Job Committee will discuss how to advance scientific technology, overhaul Korea's education system, and find ways to implement structural reforms within the industrial and labor sectors.
and also said that in order to reinvigorate Korea's sputtering economy, the assembly has to devise measures to ensure that hefty corporate cash reserves can flow back into the economy, either through investment, dividends, or salaries. He said with more disposable income, households would increase their spending and consumption, giving the economy a much-needed boost. North Korea also took up a big chunk of An's parliamentary address, and he urged the government to take a more dovish stance on inter-Korean relations.
There have been no cases of a regime collapsing through external pressure or sanctions, so dialogue and cooperation are essential to achieving a peaceful reunification. At the end of sanctions stands the negotiating table.
On top of that, he suggested South Korea offer to remove sanctions if North Korea can prove that it has changed course away from provocations and aggression. To that end, An called on the South Korean government to lay the groundwork for future economic and cultural exchanges with North Korea once the tensions between the two Koreas dissipate. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around the world, Brits will head to the polls on Thursday to decide whether the UK stays in or withdraws from the EU. While the verbal slugfest between the two campaigns is heating up, the latest polls show it could go either way, leave or remain. Here's Hwang Woo-jun on the decision that could reshape a nation.
It's a toss-up. Polls are showing that the Brexit battle is back in a deadlock, with intense personal attacks and conflicting facts muddying the increasingly heated debates. Europe's Natsen Social Research Center says the results of the referendum could still go either way, based on an average of 6 recent polls. British Prime Minister David Cameron implored citizens on Tuesday to vote to stay in the EU.
It will just be you in that polling booth, just you taking a decision that will affect your future, your children's future, your grandchildren's future.
Boris Johnson, the leader of the Leave campaign and the former mayor of London, said at a BBC-moderated debate on the same day that the Remain side is woefully underestimating the UK. He got a hearty round of applause from supporters for saying that leaving could make June 23rd the UK's Independence Day. Polling stations in the UK will be open from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Thursday local time. The vote counting will start immediately afterward, and the world will likely know whether Britain will stay in the EU or leave it by early Friday morning. Hwang Woo-jun, Arirang News.
And of course, investors around the world are keeping a close eye on the referendum, Korea being no exception. For more on how the decision could affect the Korean economy, we turn to Hwang Ji-hae.
If Britain decides to leave the EU, analysts forecast a massive capital outflow from Korea, which does not hold a key currency and is seen more as an emerging economy, especially when events of global financial uncertainty arise. They say a Brexit would trigger a flight to safe assets like the US dollar, the Japanese yen, or gold.
There's about $31 billion worth of British investment in Korea's stock market, so if we see a Brexit, a huge chunk of that capital will flow back out to the UK.
That $31 billion represents nearly 10% of all the foreign capital in Korea's securities market and is the second largest overall. And we've already seen how local shares might react to a possible Brexit, with Korea's benchmark Kospi dropping for 6 straight days from the 9th to the 16th. The index erased some $40 billion in market cap. From a trading perspective, however, the impact is likely to be limited. Korea's exports to the UK take up a mere 1.5% of all outbound shipments. If the Leave side wins, Britain will have a 2-year negotiation period with the EU about the terms of its departure. And experts say the transition would act as a grace period for Korea, which would have to set new terms with the UK because the free trade deal with the EU would no longer be valid. What is crucial, though, is for Korea to cement a new deal within that period.
If Korea fails to secure a new free trade deal with the UK before the 2-year negotiation period, there's the possibility of Korea's products losing price competitiveness because of import duties.
Experts add that concluding those talks within the 2 years will not be an easy task.
Considering that Brexit is ultimately an event that's expected to damage global economic confidence and investment, they say it would further hurt Korean exports, which have been plunging for around a year and a half now. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Staying with the topic, Korea's top central banker has warned that uncertainties are growing both within and outside the domestic economy. Leading a meeting with other economists on Wednesday, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol cited Britain's EU referendum and a possible rate hike by the U.S. Federal Reserve as major uncertainties. Within the Korean economy, Lee mentioned the government-led corporate restructuring drive that's already pushing up unemployment in regions where shipyards are concentrated. The restructuring drive focuses on Korea's ailing shipping and shipbuilding industries. The BOK chief said the recent cut in Korea's key rate, coupled with widely expected fiscal support in the second half, could buffer the potential impact, but needs closer monitoring still. The Korean government is lifting regulations on electromagnetic waves for the early commercialization of 5G technology, drones, and the Internet of Things ahead of the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. The Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning says it has simplified the authorization process of efficiency tests when companies install 5G radio command stations for drones and autonomous vehicles. What used to take up to 6 months for government approval will now take a maximum of 8 weeks. Also, to speed up the development of the country's exclusive IoT connectivity, the ministry is abolishing its 10 milliwatt electromagnetic frequency limit to allow frequency distances of up to 200 milliwatts. These are the stories we're following at this hour. As always, thank you for watching.